Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this program today we'll be discussing what lies behind the success of the Abraham Accords, especially now that Sudan wants to sign a formal peace treaty with the nation of Israel. Warm welcome to the programme, and today's special guest is a good friend of mine, good friend of the Middle East Report. He's a regular. His name is Peter Baum, and he's from Essex, and he's representing he's the foreign editor of the Weekly Blitz, together as well, been highly involved in the South End Friends of Israel group. Peter, always a pleasure to have you on the programme. How are you doing?
Thanks very much for having me back, Simon. Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Likewise, and it's a good opportunity to give our viewers an update on some of the articles you've been writing on for Weekly Blitz and also Gatestone Institute, which is a really good publication, and also your work with South End Friends of Israel.
Sure. There aren't too many media outlets that are prepared to put their head above the parapet. Revelation TV certainly is one when it comes to a pro-Israel stance, and we thank you for that, and all supporters of Israel thank Revelation TV and especially yourself for being so courageous in what is a hostile environment for against Israel by the media. Weekly Blitz is very similar. It's an Islamic publication. I think I'm probably maybe one, if not the only one, of the Jewish faith who is a foreign editor for an Islamic magazine. And the editor, Saladin Chowdhury, is a very brave individual based in Bangladesh. He's served time in prison, 7 years, simply because of his pro-Israel stance. The new administration in Bangladesh allows him to publish Blitz and allows me to publish pro-Israel articles in a magazine and in a country that has historically been hostile to the Jewish state of Israel. Nevertheless, I'm allowed to do it. He tells me that he can charge more for advertising space on near my articles than his other contributors, and I'm told that it's gaining an audience out there, if not driven by the Abraham Accords, certainly by a realisation that Israel is not a pariah state.
No, which is absolutely incredible. So maybe we can see a warming of relations between Israel and Bangladesh, and you certainly play a role in that as well, Peter. But also, do you want to give us an update on some of the Israel activities on behalf of South End Friends of Israel?
Indeed. Post-COVID, we're now getting our act together, and South End Friends of Israel have linked with a fairly new organisation called the National Jewish Assembly, and we're co-sponsoring Yom HaAtzmaut with the National Jewish Assembly in April, Israel's 70th anniversary. 75th, my apologies, 75th, of course it is. And along with the National Jewish Assembly, we hope to get a higher profile in the months ahead.
Excellent. Pray that goes well. I'm sure it will, as we celebrate Israel's remarkable achievements of 70 years being a state reborn. Peter, in this week's edition of the Middle East Report, we're discussing the success of the Abraham Accords. Could you please remind me and our viewers what the Abraham Accords are and how they came about?
Yeah, it's no coincidence that they're called what they are called, Abraham being the patriarch of the three Abrahamic religions, and basically it's a joint agreements between Israel and former enemies of Israel to create a road to peace by the normalisation of relations between former countries that were hostile to the Jewish state of Israel. And those agreements hopefully will grow as the months go by.
Yeah, so namely the United Arab Emirates,
Indeed.
Bahrain, Morocco. We'll be talking about Sudan later, and of course the big one is the prospect of Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely correct.
Yes. But of course, President Trump was kind of instrumental in initiating these peace accords. And of course broke the notion, I should say rather, that was held by the US State Department for generations. It was also echoed by President Obama's Secretary of State, John Kerry, in which he said the only way for Israel to make peace with the Arab world was through an agreement with the Palestinians. And of course that's proved to be false. Do you want to kind of elaborate on the success of the Trump administration in initiating the Abraham Accords and actually then bypassing what was once the only avenue to the prospect of Israel having peace with the Arab neighbours through a peace agreement with the Palestinian Authority?
Yeah, of course. Now, as we all know, President Trump was and still is a very divisive figure in the world of geopolitics. Whatever we as individuals think about him and his administration, the one thing that he will be renowned for and his administration will go down in history for will be the success of the initiatives he originated between Israel and various other Arab countries. The Abraham Accords, irrespective of those people who wish to be totally negative on the Jewish state of Israel, are an historic and positive achievement. And thanks to President Trump, that legacy will live and it will grow. And as we've seen, even though he's no longer in office, the Abraham Accords are expanding and will continue to expand. So originally, between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and now with Morocco, and going forward we hope Sudan and certainly Saudi Arabia, but something as a byproduct of the Abraham Accords that we are noticing is a number of African countries who have started reinstituting their once positive relationships with Israel and now want to continue on that path that was broken when the Arab oil revenues started to break the connection between the African nations and Israel. Chad recently opened up an embassy in Tel Aviv, wow. Which was remarkable by all accounts. Israel has now got relations with at least 20, I think maybe 23 African countries where teams of Israeli agricultural experts are providing assistance in terms of assisting those African countries in terms of agricultural production and water irrigation. And that's all as a byproduct of the Abraham Accords. So apart from the direct relations, normalisation of relations that Israel will continue to have with the Arab countries, in the 60s, Israel was preeminent in assisting the underdeveloped African countries with their agriculture. That was broken, but that's now on a growing path.
That's very encouraging. Great news about Chad moving their embassy to Tel Aviv as well. But how significant do you think the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain signing their peace treaty, but also a normalisation of relations with Israel on the White House lawn back on the 15th of September 2020, which even at the time received very, very little media coverage?
Yeah, it's one of the most incredible feats of any American administration to originate that normalisation of relationships. And being preeminent high-profile Gulf states that the EU listened to, that the United Nations listens to, it's a huge achievement. And what's even more incredible is I'm boringly disciplined about my research about Israel's relationships with other countries. And one can just see from the trade ties which are on an increasing upward trajectory between Israel and those two countries you mentioned, that month by month the development is just going to continue to cement, enhance the relationship. Tourism between Israel and Bahrain, Morocco and the UAE is growing at a rate that is quite incredible. And the more that people from both countries can visit each other, the better the chances are that Israel's role in the Middle East as a peace partner, as a country with whom the world can have as a friend and partner, will grow. And thanks all to the Abraham Accords.
Absolutely. I just want to quote something from the official government website of the United Arab Emirates. They say that this is how they refer to the Abraham Accords, as a warm peace transforming the Middle East. And it's about normalisation of relations, as you mentioned. But how different is the relationship that Israel has with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain in comparison to the peace treaty that Israel historically signed with Egypt at the Camp David Accords in 1979? And then, of course, also with Jordan in 1995.
Yeah, it's quite different in this major respect. Israel was officially at war with both Jordan and Egypt, and has not been officially at war with either the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain or Morocco. So from that respect, the treaty was different. Fortunately, Israel has managed to continue with the peace treaties of both Jordan and Egypt, both of whom internally have issues. There's no domestic issues, there's no doubt about that, but both governments, in my opinion, are absolutely dedicated to continuing on those peace treaties, irrespective of the problems with the Palestinians.
Oh, absolutely.
Bahrain and the UAE, never officially at war with Israel, have a different perspective. Apart from seeing the economic benefits of ties with Israel, the Iran situation is certainly a driver to ensure that the Abraham Accords are not only a success, but continue to grow.
Absolutely, which is really good. Can you also share with us the importance and significance of the Rome summit that occurred last December that celebrated the Abraham Accords? It brought world leaders, ambassadors, diplomats and clergies from more than 30 different countries for the first annual Abraham Accords Global Leadership Summit.
Yeah, this was a remarkable public relations success. There's no doubt about it. But naturally, going back to what you said earlier on, mainstream media certainly downplayed it. Nevertheless, for all those countries that were involved, it was quite incredible. There are many African countries involved in it. And going back to what I said, and I think it's important that your viewers understand this. When I first got interested in geopolitical affairs, in the mid-60s, Israel had a preeminent role assisting African nations in their agricultural and water irrigation situation. And that link was broken as oil revenues driven by Arab nations hostile to Israel decided to corrupt African politics and politicians, and former friendly African nations decided to break off those friendships. 50 or so years down the road, we're now seeing those former relationships develop purely as a result of the Abraham Accords and those Arab nations deciding that Israel can be a friend irrespective of what's going on with the Israeli-Palestinian politics.
Amazing. So let's have a look now at the first World Abraham Accords conference that took place in Rome back in December of 2022.
The event here in Rome is called the Abraham Accords Global Leadership Summit, a first of its kind gathering to expand, build on, and strengthen the Abraham Accords. The summit brought together ambassadors, diplomats, religious leaders, and policy makers. Former Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, hosted the event.
It's an amazing event where we have dozens of leaders from all around the world coming together to learn from us, the countries in the region who achieved peace, how we did it, and what we can do to help them.
I think this summit is important of two reasons. One is that Abraham Accords has been 2 years. Everyone are asking what is next, and I think this conference will try to address that question. Secondly, I think it's significant that this conference is taking place in Europe, in Rome, and I think that we need to look and see how we can get the European countries more involved so that Europe could play a constructive role in the Middle East.
A major theme of the conference emphasized traditional family values of the Abrahamic religions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam.
Traditional family values are the core of whatever peace efforts we want to make. Without basing our main common goals on family values, then we can't actually aim to protect this family.
Unfortunately, I have to say that in the West, the traditional family values have been eroding for the last 60 years, more and more. Having now moved to live in the UAE for the last 2.5 years since the Abraham Accords, have kind of reminded us again of these cherished values of the ages and millennia.
It's important for me because we are talking about Abraham Accords, and then we share the past, the three religions that are coming from Abraham, and I think we need to share the future also.
Economic peace also played a major role in how prosperity can promote peace. Geopolitics surrounding the region are still shifting as China is now courting Saudi Arabia. Even so, Ambassador Danon hinted to participants that the Saudis might be the next country to join the Abraham Accords.
We have been working with the Saudis for many years quietly, and I hope that within a year we'll be able to have another ceremony signing with the Saudis. We want to have peace in the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia is a very important partner for us.
The summit ended with the signing of an Abrahamic values pledge with the goal to help spread the spirit of the Abraham Accords to the nations. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Rome.
And, you know, there we can see the success of the Abraham Accords, and that was the first kind of major international gathering to celebrate the success of the Abraham Accords and Israel's normalizations with once former enemies in the Arab world are now close friends. Peter, I also want to talk about something as well. I mean, in the last decade or so, maybe even a bit more, that Israel's had a real battle with what is known as the BDS movement, the boycott, divestments and sanctions, whereby those that advocate support for the Palestinian cause have been pushing pressure on companies, on universities, on governments to divest and put sanctions in place against Israel for the alleged treatment of the Palestinians. And of course, the main intention is to damage Israel's reputation around the world, hurt Israel economically. But clearly we're seeing that the Abraham Accords have just kind of blown that out of the water, and the amount of money of cooperation between the United Arab Emirates and Israel is phenomenal, as we'll discuss at the end of the programme. But how have the Abraham Accords really countered the devastating impact of the BDS movement?
Yeah, two things there, Simon. BDS ran a very successful propaganda campaign to try and damage Israel's economy. One country, the Republic of Ireland, went so far as attempting to pass legislation to criminalise trade with Israel And when the Americans pointed out that they may be in contravention of US law and that would damage their own trade with the United States, they rode back a bit. But nevertheless, another US administration might change that legislation, and I'm sure the Republic of Ireland will continue on that path. In universities and in the world of left-wing politics, BDS as a soundbite is still an important issue for those hostile to the Jewish state of Israel. Indeed, even within the Jewish community, those on the left of politics actually support the BDS movement. In reality, something completely different is happening. The trade between Israel and the rest of the world, and especially those who have joined the Abraham Accords, is on an immutable upward trajectory. If just one looks at the tourism, the defence, the world of cybersecurity, technology, food production, water irrigation, Israel is a world leader, a market leader, and trade will ultimately determine the success or failure of the BDS movement. Now, occasionally you might get a pop star celebrity who's well known who decides to support the BDS movement by not playing a concert in Israel. A great PR story for those who are hostile to the Jewish state of Israel, but frankly, that's all it is, because in reality, it's the trade growth that will determine the ultimate failure of the BDS movement.
So let's see how the Abraham Accords are helping to counter the negative impact of the BDS.
The Jerusalem Leaders Summit aims to keep the rule of law a priority while advancing economic freedom and free trade.
While being here today is so vital in to affirm our shared values and principles, to strengthen our ties with Israel, and to address some of the core problems that we're facing.
Joel Anand Sami and his wife, Natasha Surdoch, began this gathering in 2015 to address key issues such as growing anti-Semitism and the BDS movement against Israel.
We know that over the past few years, there has been an erosion of support from the United States towards Israel. We've seen that with the rise of BDS, and in fact, 30% of registered Democrats support BDS, according to a poll from the University of Maryland.
Anand Sami and others spoke about the important history of U.S.-Israel relations.
President Lincoln then said, "Restoring the Jews to their national home is a noble dream and one shared by many Americans." And America's leaders were faithful in their support of the Jewish community.
Cheryl Chumley of the Washington Times, co-sponsor of the summit, sees a deep biblical connection as well.
Israel and America are natural allies. It's undeniable. The very foundations of America's liberties are rooted in Jewish history.
Chumley says even if support for Israel seems to be less right now, there's hope.
The good news. In America, as you are aware, the politics always change. My foreign policy starts with eyes on Israel because of my Christian belief where God says, "Those who bless my people, I will bless. Those who curse my people, I will curse."
America was the first nation to officially recognize the Jewish state independence nearly 75 years ago. American leadership was instrumental in supporting the Camp David Accords signed by Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin.
Surdoch says all of this helped lead to the 2020 Abraham Accords.
Signing of the Abraham Accords was a historic accomplishment in bringing peoples together that have been cut off from opportunities to trade and invest between themselves and from visiting each other.
Many who spoke pointed to Jerusalem as the hub of the Middle East and the Abraham Accords.
The road to peace runs through the city of Jerusalem.
Ambassador David Friedman was U.S. ambassador here when President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the Jewish people.
Many people predicted an explosion of violence, but indeed, What resulted was an explosion of peace over the next 4 years.
Jerusalem Deputy Mayor Fleur Hassan Nahum has been involved with the Abraham Accords for the last 2 years.
Ultimately, people see Jerusalem as the core of the challenges, but I see Jerusalem as in fact the laboratory of the solutions, not just of the city, but of the country and the region.
These historic Abraham Accords may be one of the most underreported success stories of our time. We believe that more can be done and should be done through the encouragement and positive engagement of American leadership and America's allies around the world.
Surdoch says it brought the countries together against Iran, and she urged expanding the accords by reaching out to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, and other Arab nations, which she believes would usher in a new era of peace, prosperity, and stability. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And there can be no doubt at all that not only are the Abraham Accords transforming Israel, but they're also transforming the Middle East. Now, it's incredible to announce that the Israeli Foreign Minister, I think Eli Cohen, visited Sudan the beginning of February of this month, where he met with the president of Sudan and his military administration to work out a formal peace agreement that will be signed later in the year on the lawn of the White House lawn in what will be an historic an occasion. Just share with us about how this new peace agreement through the Abraham Accords between Israel and Sudan, who was once a sworn enemy of the State of Israel, came about.
As you know, and your viewers that know me will know, no one is more positive about the Jewish state of Israel than I am. But I have to temper this enthusiasm with some harsh reality. Now, whilst it's wonderful that Israel will sign a peace agreement with Sudan, as she has done with Morocco, there's some geopolitical events that have driven that as much as Sudan's and Morocco's willingness to sign peace agreements with Israel. If we take Sudan as the first example, Sudan has been a sponsor of terrorism within the Sahel region of Africa and in Ethiopia for decades. And one of the driving factors that has brought Sudan to the table is their commitment to stop sponsoring terrorism and in return receive aid from the US administration. So let's be completely realistic about this. There is a quid pro quo, and Sudan have another issue that other Arab nations have to face. Morocco has taken this head on, that after years of anti-Jewish state hostility within their press, within their school curriculum, etc., they now have to row back on that, as Bahrain and the UAE have very successfully done, changing their education curriculum in promoting a more friendly Jewish state to their population. Morocco has been remarkable in what she has achieved with the Holocaust memorial and changing the education system, and Sudan has to go through that process as well. Now, the current Sudanese government, whilst unpopular, not as unpopular, let's say, the Iranian government domestically, will face challenges internally. If she gets through that, and I'm sure she will with EU and American help, then she will easily override those issues, and a normalisation will occur in the months ahead.
And also, what's extraordinary, particularly with Sudan as well, is that Israel has been that Israel has classified Sudan as an enemy state and has been at war with Sudan ever since Israel's War of Independence, when the Sudanese government sent Sudanese soldiers to fight against Israel in her War of Independence. Israel also smuggled out thousands of Ethiopian Jews from Sudan, and that great story about the Red Sea spies and the Red Sea resort, and which Israeli naval commandos rescued them from the beach. So of course we know of the hostility between Israel and Sudan, but I mean strategically, the enhancing of relations between, a normalisation of relations between Israel and Sudan could open up for Israel the whole of Africa, couldn't it? On a lot of Middle East, a lot of Muslim African states to Israel.
That's true, but let me just bring you and the audience back to where I came from.
Sure, of course.
Naturally, the normalisation of relationships between Israel and Sudan will be an incredible positive, but Sudan does face internal issues before we get to that stage, and one of those issues is going to be to re-educate her population. In Africa, irrespective of what goes on with Sudan, Israel is already making positive inroads, as I've suggested, with their experts being out in various countries, health experts, agricultural experts, water irrigation experts. That will continue, and Africa, as those countries that have welcomed Israeli expertise, are seeing the benefits of it. Sudan will be just a plus, a major plus, but whatever Israel does in Africa will not stop. Obviously, normalisation of relationships with Sudan will only expedite that process.
Absolutely. And reflecting upon the Abraham Accords, we have to remind ourselves that the Arab League summit was held in Khartoum in October of 1967, only a few months after Israel's incredible victory during the Six-Day War, in which the Arab leaders met with the famous 3 no's, and I'll just repeat them there. So this is no to peace with Israel, no to negotiations with Israel, and no recognition of Israel. Just share with us how far we've come, particularly Sudan, from the Khartoum summit of 67 by the Arab League, and now the Arab world, Sunni Arab world, is embracing Israel.
Okay, so I've just worked that out. That's 55 years ago.
Well done.
So that's where we were, and look at where we are now. It's 55 years is a long time. There are people who unfortunately have since passed us that would have loved to have witnessed what we're seeing in 2023. So the Almighty works in very strange ways, Simon, and it's taken 55 years, but from where Israel was with Sudan in 1967, with that hostile summit, to where she is now, is an incredible metamorphosis. And hopefully we'll just see that change, those positive changes increase in the months and years ahead.
And of course, I mean, the current military government in Sudan wants to transition to a civilian government, and this is why they are taking their time in announcing that they want to have a ceremony on the White House lawn to formalise a peace treaty with Israel and normalisations with Israel. And, President Biden will take a lot of credit for this, but the reality is the Democrats and his administration really haven't invested that much in the Abraham Accords, have they?
No, they haven't, and this goes back to what we were saying previously, that whatever one thinks of the Trump administration and President Trump, ex-President Trump himself, the one outstanding and overriding legacy will be his origination of this fantastic piece of government legislation we know as the Abraham Accords. It will live for time immemorial, and whatever one thinks of President Trump, he will be remembered for, and he and his administration will be remembered for this absolute positive that has done so much to enhance peace between Israel and her former enemies.
And Peter, in return for normalisations with Israel, Sudan will be assisted by the Jewish state in the fields of food security, water resource management, agriculture, humanitarian aid, water purification and public medicine. Share with us how Israel is a light unto the nations.
Okay, I fear that I may have already answered this question with what I was saying about Africa, but we can see if one is as close to what's going on in the African continent as I am through my various research, contacts in politics, etc., we can see virtually every day of the week how Israel is benefiting the African continent. In fact, there's a weekly newsletter that your viewers may be interested in, which I've started receiving about 6 months ago. I think it's called the Israel Good News newsletter. IGNN. I get it weekly, and I think one can subscribe to it. And every week when this comes out, there is another initiative about the benefits of Israeli technology and expertise within that continent. And it's remarkable. Health, water purification, agricultural production enhancement, all these initiatives to see Israeli technicians and experts on the ground. And just by looking at them or keying into this very simple website and newsletter will give you an idea of the impact that Israel is having on that continent, and how the BDS movement has got to, other than the odd PR win that they will have, how it's genuinely failing to achieve any of its objectives.
And also Israel being able to generate electricity and energy from solar panels as well, enhancing the power of the sun to actually give many African nations that are struggling with the electricity, which is quite incredible. And of course, you know, the benefits of that with the people is huge, isn't it? To see that their water becomes cleaner, their agriculture and crops are growing better, so they're eating healthier. Then to think also they're getting electricity from Israel's technology in terms of solar power, and improving the quality of life for ordinary Africans. They must know exactly where this comes from.
And here's where there's a division between the reality and what the public sees. So if we take South Africa as an example, the current South African government is very, very hostile to the Jewish state of Israel, very hostile. And although there is a minority of South African support, the current Ramaphosa government is, on the face of it, an enemy of Israel. However, behind the scenes, Israeli solar technology is having an impact on the African nation. The publicity that we see is that South Africa has just banned an Israeli rugby team from participating in a rugby tournament in which South Africa has invited 15 other nations. And instead of having an Israeli team given an invite, they've given it to a Mexican team. Now that's what the public and mainstream media report at. That's what Israel's enemies are going to focus on. The reality is, behind the scenes, Israel is doing some necessary sterling work that is being advantageous to the have-nots on that continent.
Which is amazing. And Israel truly is a light unto the nations. And
Sure.
as we see that the whole, even now as we hear news of the breaking earthquake in Turkey, we know that the Israeli emergency teams, the Magen David Adom, the IDF are already on the scene and helping pull rescuers out of the rubble.
And that's true, Simon, but again, I've been closely monitoring that, as we all have, and yet I watched Sky News, I think it was yesterday evening, and Sky mentioned all the international aid that Turkey is receiving, and the reporter mentioned about 7 or 8 countries that were selling aid to Turkey. Israel, as we know, is doing just that, was not given a mention. So we still face these challenges about the hostility within mainstream media to Israel, And that's something that I've been trying to
absolutely,
counter.
and I think that's another programme in itself. Just want to talk a little bit more, going back to the valuable and strategic relationship and normalisation between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. And this is absolutely incredible. So it's believed that over the next decade, the United Arab Emirates will invest, listen to this, $10 billion in Israel's high-tech sector as part of venture capital. Share with us how this is transforming relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, but also transforming the region as well.
Okay, so clearly the UAE and Israel are on a common path here, and such joint ventures in, let's call it the world of technology for want of a better word, is undoubtedly going to enhance the natural benefits that are going to arrive, the political benefits that are going to derive from that. One would hope that it gets to a stage where when it comes to an anti-Israel UN vote, we will see those nations, first of all, probably abstaining and then voting on behalf of Israel. Now, we are getting there slowly, but at the moment, those who have signed the peace accords have not found the confidence domestically to do that. I'm sure if I'm invited to this programme, let's say two years down the road, we will see that dynamic change. There's something else that's important that, again, your viewers must be aware of, and that is how difficult it is for a nation such as the UAE, and Bahrain and Morocco as well, to re-educate their population from being indoctrinated with anti-Jewish state literature and an anti-Jewish state media to somehow change that dynamics, to re-educate their population into being less hostile. And of course there will be some within domestic politics that will never change their view. There are even people in the United Kingdom, Jewish people, born into Judaism, born into Zionist family, that adopt this anti-Jewish state ideology. That I find the most frustrating. So for an Arab of the Muslim faith living in a country that for 7 decades has been hostile to Israel, to change his view into one of being friendly towards Israel is going to take a longer period. But trade and tourism will be the dynamic that drives that.
Absolutely, and of course, an important aspect of that is Holocaust education, and the United Arab Emirates deserves a lot of credit for putting Holocaust studies on its national curriculum, the first Arab state ever to do so. And of course, this year as well, they opened up their first Holocaust exhibition as well. So let's have a look at this excellent CBN news report that talks about how the Abraham Accords are transforming the Middle East, particularly when it comes to Holocaust education in the United Arab Emirates and other nations that have signed the historic Abraham Accords.
From 1939 to 1945, Nazi Germany implemented what it called the final solution to exterminate all Jews from Europe. Tragically, more than half of the Jewish people in Europe died in the Holocaust. To remember this genocide, the UN designated January 27th as a day of remembrance.
We join together, first and foremost, to honor the memory of those who perished, to ensure they are never forgotten, to give them, as it says in the book of Isaiah, a monument and a name.
Yet during a recent vote on a UN resolution combating Holocaust denial, Israel's ambassador to the UN warned the Holocaust is fading from the pages of history.
Friends, only 54% of the world population has heard of the Holocaust, with 1/3 of them skeptical of the facts. Some of them believe that the deaths have been exaggerated, while others believe that the Holocaust is a complete myth.
Despite that, there is remarkable change in the Middle East this year. as Egypt and the UAE marked the first ever Arab commemorations of the Holocaust.
It's a wonderful development to see this relationship between the Arab world and Israel getting to the point where we are seeing Holocaust commemorations.
Kohanim says it's all due to the change the Abraham Accords have brought to the Middle East.
We've seen a brand new face of the Middle East, and that is a face of acceptance of the Jewish state of Israel and acceptance of the Jewish people's sovereignty in the Middle East. And with that, really just a sea change in attitudes towards Jews in Israel.
And it's great to see those changes taking place in Egypt as well as the United Arab Emirates. And of course, Holocaust education and combating Jew hatred in the Middle East will take time, but it will totally transform the region. And this is what's so extraordinary, isn't it? That really since the end of the Second World War, it's been the Arab world and Iran that's been a hotbed of Jew hatred. It has also been the hotbed of Holocaust denial, and the fact that we have United Arab Emirates and Egypt marking International Holocaust Memorial Day, and the United Arab Emirates to have Holocaust education on their national curriculum, as well as opening an exhibition as well, is nothing less than absolutely extraordinary, isn't it?
It is extraordinary, and this opens up a much bigger picture. I think I've been harping on in this interview with you about the importance of re-educating populations, and those Arab countries who have signed up to the Abraham Accords are definitely going through that process. Sudan will have to go through a similar process. Morocco and the UAE and Bahrain are doing that, and they've achieved it very successfully. Although Israel is excellent in certain fields, agriculture, technology, defence, etc., etc., one thing that she has failed miserably at is public relations. There is no doubt about it. Not since Abba Eban, that brilliant Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, has there been someone who can so eloquently and successfully elaborate Israel to a much wider public. For reasons that I frankly don't understand, Israel has failed in that objective in the last 50 years, to such a point that even people in Western society, where, as we know from history, it's not a hard thing to be hostile to Jews or to Zionism or to the Jewish nation, but even people in Western society actually now believe, through decades of indoctrination from a hostile media, that Israel is the bad guy and the Palestinians are the underprivileged poor people who have been wronged. And this is such a false narrative that I hope, as successful as those nations who have followed the Abraham Accords are being in re-educating that population, I hope Israel devotes as much time to implementing a much better public relations strategy than she has done in the past, because it would certainly, I pray for the time there'd be no need for people like myself to challenge the false narrative.
Yeah, well, the trouble Israel has is that our mainstream media aren't prepared to tell Israel's narrative. That's the problem. There's news stories and positive news stories about Israel, the success of the Abraham Accords. They are not prepared to look at Israel beyond the conflict. Of course, with COVID, when Israel was leading the world in terms of vaccinations and kind of lockdown, the world looked at Israel as an example to get out of the mess that was COVID. And so Israel got some kind of positive PR. But on the whole, our mainstream media do not want to carry positive and encouraging news stories about Israel. And they just see Israel through the prism of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and that Israel is a colonial state, and that the Palestinians can do no wrong, never look at their incitement to hatred, never look at their terrorism, their desire to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, their refusal, despite the Abraham Accords and the benefit the Abraham Accords ever wanting to enter into a genuine peace agreement with Israel. And of course, that then gets played through our mainstream media. So it's people like you, people like myself, who are there to tell the truth of Israel's story. And of course, I think Israel's I-24 TV station is vital, because Israel has to tell her narrative. No one else is going to do it for her. But that's, again, I think that's a different program. But we've got 5 minutes of the program, so I've got 2 very important questions to ask you this one. So going back to Jew hatred in the Middle East and Holocaust denial, what important role can the United Arab Emirates now play in convincing other Arab states, not only to make peace with Israel and the benefits of making peace with Israel, but reforming their education and combating Jew hatred?
Okay, so 2 things here. Of course, the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco are definitely working with Saudi, which will be a huge plus if she determines to sign normalisation with a normalisation agreement with Israel, and she will do. But there are things that Saudi has to confront before that. Now, one of the driving factors of the Abraham Accords, of course, from the Arab nations who have signed the agreement, has been the anti-Iranian ideology, politics, fear, if you like, going on in the region. Saudi is confronting this. There's already military exercises going on with Israel, intelligence exercises, there's no doubt about that. Israeli planes are now flying over Saudi airspace, we know that. But Saudi doesn't want to over-publicise this. Why? And again, it goes back to how Saudi, more than any other country, have totally indoctrinated their population with an anti-Israeli agenda over the last 5 or 6 decades. Now, in order to turn that round, it takes time, but we are seeing it bit by bit. And I'm seeing it through certain Saudi influencers who are gaining access to Western media, doing podcasts, writing articles, and bit by bit that drip feed of pro-Israeli new media emanating from Saudi is coming through. Once the Saudi government, which let's face it, is still a totalitarian government, once the people within that cabinet feel comfortable enough that their population is at a level where they are much less hostile to the Jewish state of Israel than they have been over the last decades, then that will be the time when Saudi comes and signs the agreement. UAE, those countries that have already signed the agreement are definitely assisting Saudi within that. And as I've said to you before, the Israel-Saudi relationship is growing daily, actually driven by their joint interests in seeing Iran not be as successful as she has been militarily.
And we're less than 2 minutes left of the programme, Peter, but what's extraordinary is that the leader of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, has kind of recognised that Saudi Arabia exporting Wahhabism would actually bring down the House of Saud. So they've recognised that this seed that they've been sowing of Islamic extremism will actually destroy the Saudi kingdom. And so we've gone through incredible reforms within Saudi Arabia over taming that, and of course that will then open up the possibility for a relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which will truly be historic and change the Middle East forever. Peter, thank you so much for being my guest on the Middle East Report.
Absolute pleasure.
Unpacking the success of the Abraham Accords, and keep up the excellent work you're doing.
Thank you very much, Simon.
And I want to thank you for watching this programme today. We can see really that the Abraham Accords are transforming the Middle East. They are transforming Israel's relations with the Arab world, and sadly not getting the press coverage that they should, because this is truly historic, particularly Israel's relationship with the United Arab Emirates. And of course, when Israel makes peace with Saudi Arabia, that truly will be historic. And we're seeing a transformation in the Middle East today. So I want to thank you for watching this week's edition of the Middle East Report.